One.
Hello and welcome to the Civitas. Thank you all for joining us for our first live stream debate. I'm your host Regulus, and with me is my co-host Servius.
Hello, hello. So this is exciting. This is our first debate here on the channel. This is something we've been working on for a while now. So since this is the first debate, I do want to kind of go over what to expect from this channel before we dive into today's topic. But it's pretty straightforward. This is going to be a debate channel. We're going to be discussing various different topics from really the community. Anyone who wants to debate and talk about different things in history and even things outside of history. Anything really. It's just going to be a platform to discuss different topics and speak freely and really experience these things in different perspectives, and I think that's what's most important. So to go ahead and dive into, oh, by the way, guys, we do have a Discord as well if you want to take part in these debates. So be sure to check that out. We use that for posting new topics and everything. But let's just go ahead and dive into today's debate. We're going to be talking about if the Crusades were justified. I know this is a topic that definitely has some gray area, and it varies from different perspectives. Our two debaters, we have Arch Warhammer. What's up, man?
Hello.
And we have Pixie.
Hey guys, excited to be here.
So I'm going to go ahead and let these guys kind of have like a 3 minute just kind of stating the case of just so you know where their viewpoint is in this debate, and then we'll really get into it. So Arch Warhammer, do you want to go ahead and start us off here?
I can indeed. So, I am Arch Warhammer. I do primarily Warhammer and 40k lore, along with general strategy gaming over on my channel on YouTube, and I consider myself a bit of a general history aficionado. So, with the question of the Crusades, I was, of course, quite interested. We'll start with perhaps definitions, which we will get into in a little bit. The question of justification, of course, depends upon what your viewpoint is. Political, military, religious, warfare, and of course, how many of the Crusade we're going to be getting into. Now, I was told that we'll be concentrating primarily on the first to begin with, so I'll base my opening statement on that. The question is, was the Crusade justified? In my opinion, absolutely. In fact, the First Crusade was about as close to a just war as it is possible to get, waged on behalf and request of another in a defensive manner. It was launched, indeed, in response to a plea of aid from the Byzantine Emperor Alexius I, whose nation was reeling from repeated attacks by the Seljuk Turks. And the emperor was not the only one under attack. The Christian Western world at the time was locked in conflict with the Muslim world, after the latter invaded pretty much anyone and everyone they could in the name of Allah. Their holy wars of conquest took them all the way to the southern borders of France and the Umayyad Caliphate. They even raided Rome, desecrating several holy places, and at one point they ruled over nearly 2/3 of what had once been Christian lands. And even at that point, it took hundreds of years of one-sided religious aggression to finally compel Christianity to retaliate in any kind. And to say that they were not justified in doing so would be the same as saying that the Christian world had no right to defend itself. And that will be my opening statement. I'll cede the rest of my time to my opponent.
All right, Pixie.
Thank you for that. It was very interesting to hear from your side. But, I mean, it's easy to get lost in statistics, definitions, and reasonings. But there is only one thing that truly matters in any war, or at any time during human history. There's only one thing that matters, and that is human lives. What is a human life worth to you? And in this scenario, what is 1.7 million lives worth to you? Because that's how many were lost during the Crusades. And okay, I can understand you telling me that the Muslims started the aggression and all the rest, blah, blah, blah. But there was the retaliation worth 1.7 million lives. Okay, now we're not talking about now, where we have 9 billion population or 8, whatever. That was back then, okay? The population wasn't huge. 1.7 million lives being lost was a catastrophe to the economy, to people's families. The people that did the killings and managed to survive the PTSD that they were going through, and I'm sure they were thought to be crazy because they didn't know about these things. And another thing that's funny is the three reasons that people went on crusades was, okay, one, and I swear to you, this is the truth. One of the reasons was for fun. Some of the knights were actually going on crusades for fun. Okay, they just wanted a reason to kill, and because the Pope said you're not allowed to kill Christians, they went and killed Muslims. Okay, you can't justify that. Doesn't matter what the reason was. Doesn't matter who started the aggression. Okay, that's what a psychopath does. Goes and kills for fun. And two was for love and revenge. And of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with the saying, two rights don't make a wrong. Hence why the Crusades were justified. And the third was, well, they went looting. And I'm sure it's the classic I'm not sure you're going to come out with a lot of knights went bankrupt during the Crusades. But, well, not a lot of them went with the intentions to go bankrupt. A lot of them thought they were going to be able to loot and just rob everything of the people that they killed. And also that wasn't that's not how it ended up being. That was their intention. And that also matters just as much. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, I think this actually gets into something interesting, and that's the intention of the Crusade. So I think we can jump into that. So on one side, seems to be disingenuous action for greed and everything else, and the other side seems to see it as more of a defensive action. Perhaps there's a clear religious element. So I guess we can get more into that question. I guess I would say, I like to hear Arch's response to this idea that Crusaders and the Crusades was something that was motivated purely by monetary gain.
Okay, well, that's clearly ridiculous. If that was the case, why had they not set out previously? Why were the Christians not regularly raiding the Muslim world like the Muslims were raiding the Christian world?
Well, who said that they didn't? Of course, it's different. I mean, to start an all-out war, which the Pope finally did once he lost Jerusalem. Of course, but before that, there was many skirmishes between the Muslims and Christians. There just wasn't an all-out war, but there were skirmishes.
Well, no, it was an all-out war. Indeed, the Muslims themselves defined the Crusades. They don't even recognize the Crusades as a separate act. They view them as a continuation of the Frankish Wars, which they had been fighting for hundreds of years previously. Again, their entrance into what was then Christian lands began literally hundreds of years before the Crusades in an organized expansion.
Okay. When the Pope called on the First Crusade, do you know what he said? He said that God spoke to him and told him to go and kill the Muslims. That is what he said. If you read about it, that's what he said. He said that God spoke to him. He's clearly manipulated the knights to go out on the war. Okay, that's manipulation. How can he justify that? He manipulated the people.
Well, I do believe that a certain Muhammad also claimed repeatedly to have had conversations with the Almighty. And I also believe that their religious expansion, well, if it isn't unjustified for the Christians to wage holy war, how could it possibly be justified for the Islamic world to do so?
I never said that I justified the Islamic war. I'm here to justify the Crusades. I don't care about if it's right or wrong. That's a different conversation. I'm here to talk about the Crusades and if it was justified, which it wasn't.
Well, that is where we need to return to the question of definitions, which is very important. Definitions in this case would be what is a just war. In my case, a just war is in self-defense. The Christian world was under attack and had been so for hundreds of years. Not striking back at this point is essentially arguing that they should simply have rolled over to a one-sided, overt, aggressive invader and given up their lives, liberties, freedoms, and possessions, which I consider to be extremely immoral. Every man has a right to defend what is his.
What is a human life worth to you? Is it worth the ego of a pope, the monetary status of a pope, because that's what it resulted in. The Pope got rich while 1.7 million lives were lost.
Human lives are worth precisely the value we ascribe to them. In this case, a human life, depended upon the interpretation of those at the time, was clearly worth a counter-offensive. They did not wish to become subjects of the Muslim world, and they were willing to put their lives on the lines to stop doing so. By the time's morals, and hell, by the time's morals, it was not only a justified act, it was a sacred act that would see them be sent to heaven. If we are to judge them by our moral standards, hell, even then it falls through. This argument is essentially the same as saying that we should not have fought Nazi Germany because it would have endangered human lives.
So I guess what I would like to know, the clear difference here is what should have been Christendom's response to the Muslim aggression, specifically Pixie.
They could have made peace. Okay, at the end of the day, it was about protecting the pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem. Okay, they could have made peace if that was their true intention. Because many knights rose up and went to fight when they heard that pilgrims were actually being attacked by Muslims. Okay, and if that was their intention to protect these pilgrims, they could have simply went and made peace. But that wasn't their intention. Their intention was for monetary gain.
Okay. I absolutely disagree. The Muslim world would not make peace. They had been attacking for hundreds of years. In fact, they defined the world by a very simple idea. There was Islam, and there was everybody else. And they would continue attacking everybody else until there was nothing but Islam, as we can see by the fact that not only were they attacking Christendom for hundreds of years previously, and hundreds of years after the Crusades ended, Muslim, how do I put it, invasion of Christian lands, in Europe in particular, did not stop until the final defeat at the Battle of Vienna in the 1600s, in the end of the 1600s, in fact. Making peace with a faction that simply continues to assault and invade you for religious reasons seems incredibly unpractical, if not impossible.
It's funny you say that. It's funny how you say Christian lands. Didn't those lands actually belong to the Eastern people? I'm not going to say the Muslims, because before they were Muslims, they were the Eastern people, from those areas. The Romans came, took it, plundered it, raped it, and conquered it, and they just wanted their lands back.
If you go back far enough, the lands were originally owned by monkeys. The simple fact is, the lands at the time were Christian lands. They were then invaded, and not by its original owners either. It's not like the Arabs had any greater claim to the lands than the Christians that was currently living there. And if we're going to go by seniority, then certainly the Roman Empire had a far greater claim.
Yeah, but to what means did it have a far greater claim? And again, we're going off topic. We're not here to talk about who was right or wrong. We're here to talk about how the Crusades were justified and whether that was adequate. And it wasn't.
Well, now, again, you started the conversation by stating that you didn't really care about definitions, but if we don't go by definitions, we cannot determine what we are talking about. Again, as far as I am concerned, the Crusades were justified because they were a military action launched in response to open aggression at the behest of another party. That alone, from a military standpoint, more than justifies the Crusade.
I'm willing to listen to definitions, but you're talking about, let's say the Crusades were unjustified, but was the Muslim invasion. And that's the thing. We're not here to talk about Muslims. Let's just, we can't forget about them, but it's not whether who was right, who was wrong, who began. It's the Crusades, and the Crusades were said to have begun because God told the Pope to go kill Muslims. And we just know that's not true. God didn't tell anyone to kill anyone. It was the Pope that manipulated people and ended up costing 1.7 million lives. How can you justify that many people dying?
Hey, if I could cut in really quick and just bring up the how it was, especially specifically the First Crusade. You're bringing up the Pope a lot, but you could say the Byzantine Empire or Emperor was really the one that was calling for aid. In your view, Pixie, was the war initially not defensive to help the Byzantine Empire from losing territory?
I mean, yeah, you could say that as well, but if that was the intention, like I told you before, when at the interview stage, they could have came out and said, we don't want to lose territory, we don't want to lose our monetary gain, let's just go to war. But no, they made this a holy one. They made this a holy cause. They made this a religious war. And to be honest, there was nothing here that could justify a religious war. There's many things that could justify an all-out war just for money, but nothing that could justify a religious war. That's what the Crusades comes from. That's what the Crusades is known for.
So you're saying they could have easily have just like sent up an army under the banner of, England or France, just showing up as a relief force instead of making it, a religious act of,
Yes, of course. But they did it. What they did was they went and told people that God's told me that you should go out and kill people. Okay, they manipulated people, and that's what makes it like so terrible, because they didn't just say it how it was. But I wouldn't have any problem if they did that. There's many wars that went on before that. I'm not complaining about them because none of them said that God told us to do this. But they went and made this a religious thing because the Pope, the Byzantine Empire, couldn't afford an army. So instead, they made people pay for it out of their own pockets by saying that you can go to heaven if you do this.
Hold on now. Are you stating that the Muslims did not wage war for religious concerns?
We're not talking about the Muslims. We're talking about the Crusades.
You cannot separate a defensive war from the aggressive side.
I'm here talking about if you can justify the Crusades, not about the Muslims and all that. That's a whole other discussion.
Well, no. We are talking about a defensive war launched in response to foreign aggression. We cannot simply just cut the offensive part out of that discussion.
Well,
Sorry,
my bad.
No, go on.
Well, you could say, if you want to play it like that, you could say that the Muslims were just trying to regain the territory that the Byzantine Empire took. And then you could just play that back and forth like ping pong.
Well, the Seljuk Turks had no claim to the Byzantine lands, as far as I'm aware. When did they settle it initially?
The Seljuk Turks were a combination of many, many, many peoples, including the people that were natives to them. They were just under a different name.
Okay. So that doesn't sound like they have any particular claim over the Constantinople loyalists then, Byzantine Empire.
Of course they did. These Westerners came in and took the eastern lands. It belonged to the East.
It belonged to the East, but not necessarily to these people. I mean, these lands have been under Roman control for centuries previously. Where's the cutoff limit?
And now they want it back.
And they did so by waging religious war, to which Christianity responded.
No, they waged a war, not a religious war. They just waged a war. The Seljuk Turks just invaded, pillaged, and raped the entire land of everything it had. That's it. It had a war. It didn't try to justify it as a religious war, unlike the Christians, which did.
Oh, absolutely, they tried. In fact, it is one of the earliest things we know about Islam. A quote from Khalid al-Walid, the literal sword of Allah. I call to you God and to Islam. If you respond to the call, you are Muslim. You obtain the benefits if they enjoy and take up the responsibilities they bear. If you refuse, then you must pay the jizya. If you refuse to pay the jizya, I will bring against you the tribes of people who are more eager for death than you are for life. We will fight you until God decides between us and you. This is one of the first instances of Islam appearing in the world. And it's a straight-up religious challenge. If you fight with me, you are Muslim. If you resist me, you must submit and pay religious tax, or I will bring war against you. You cannot separate warfare from this part of the world from Islam.
That's actually very interesting. I didn't know that. And thank you for informing us of this. However, I also have a little side question. How were the Crusades justified?
Okay, once again, as I have stated already, they were justified in the means of a defensive war, fought against a foreign aggressor at the behest of the Byzantine Emperor.
It sounds like you're reading like a definition of Google. Like, who said it? Who justified it?
Well, no, this is just a common sense definition of a defensive war, really. You have been attacked, an ally have requested aid, and you have dispatched it.
Yes, but I'm saying, how was it justified? We're here talking about whether it was justified or wasn't, but how was it justified? How did the Pope, the Byzantine Empire, or whoever, how did they justify it to the people?
I don't know how I can explain it differently.
Let me answer it for you. It wasn't. It wasn't justified. They couldn't justify it.
So the military justification is moot. You don't care about that.
There is no military. Listen, it doesn't matter how far you go back, you will not find a justification for the Crusades from the Pope or any emperor or king. They literally said, God has told us to go kill these non-believers. And some people went for their own different reasons. Some went for love and vengeance. Some went for money. Some went for just fun of it, just so they could kill. There was no justification other than God said do this, and people just went for their own reasons. Some people were even forced to, so they don't go to prison.
Yeah, so I'd like to know, should the Latin Christians should have just ignored the request of Eastern Christians to retake their land? Like, what should they have just stayed out of it entirely?
Well, many did until they heard that the pilgrims were being attacked on the way to Jerusalem. And that's when everything kicked off. But if they really wanted to protect these pilgrims, they could have just made peace. But they didn't. Instead, they chose to go to war. And that is one of the other reasons.
So we know the Muslim world's clearly divided too. They have their own internal affairs. How do you make peace with all of these different groups? What if some people are opposed to that and they actually are, as far as like plundering pilgrims is concerned?
How did they make peace after the first crusade? Clearly peace was viable because they kept going to crusades and then making peace and then more crusade and then peace. Peace was on the table, but it was all about ego, pride, arrogance, and these big higher nobles and kings and popes having so much to lose that they kept going back to war. The common people wanted peace.
Well, again, I've already more or less responded to that by the simple fact that Muslim aggression did not halt before 1683. And also, I would like to request a source for Pope Urban saying that he had been told by God. Now, the speech at Clermont was destroyed, but at least the version I have does not mention him being told by God to do this.
Of course, I'll give you a quote actually. Just to give me a moment, please. Let's see here. Let me just. Here goes. The Pope Urban II's sermon in 1295 said, "Brothers, I speak as a messenger from God. Your fellow Christians in the East desperately need help. The Saracens have attacked them and have pushed them deep into the Christian land. They are killing great number of Christians. They are destroying churches and land. In the name of God, I beg you." He said all of this, right, to the people. And believe it or not, actually, none of it was true. Now, I'll give you the link right now. None of it was true if you read it. He literally lied to just, give that crusade the little boost that it needed. The Pope was lying from beginning till the end.
Did you say 1295?
That was one of them. I don't think that was the beginning of the Crusades, was it?
Okay, so we are speaking about Pope Urban's speech here at Clermont at the First Crusade, or are we speaking about a different crusade now?
1295.
Okay, well, Pope Urban was, I believe he had been dead for a very long time at that point.
The Crusades began from 1095 till 1492. I'm pretty sure he was alive at 1295 when the Crusades were happening.
95 years later.
Well, I'm talking about the Crusades as a general one. We're not just sticking to the first Crusade. There were 7 Crusades.
Okay, well, we can certainly widen up the definition, certainly. And if we if we even are willing to just say that this Pope said that he had been commanded by God to do this, I still don't see how that talks against the First Crusade and the immediate justification of the Crusade as a defensive war.
Okay. To justify something, it means that it was worth it, right? Basically, right? To justify something,
No.
it means that this was worth it. Well, what
I
does it mean?
disagree with that definition. To justify simply means to find a reason for that is considered adequate.
Okay, so basically, was it worth it, right? Adequate.
Well-
Adequate means it was worth it, technically. Yes?
No, really, not really. It's not whether or not it was worth it. Is it whether or not people will agree? If it is, how do I explain?
So if they agree,
adequate-
that means it was worth it.
No, there's a difference between whether or not something was worth it and whether or not people generally agree that it was just.
Okay, was
Well,
killing
was
1.7
bombing
million
Japan
people just?
justified, or was it worth it?
Was killing 1.7 million justified?
In a defensive war? Sure.
Defensive
I mean,
war
if
for
it
who?
wasn't,
For who?
So
then how could we possibly justify casualties in war in general? Again,
Well-
we return to the point of, if we go by this logic, we should not have fought the Nazis because it
Yeah, but-
had people killed.
Who was at war? The people weren't at war. Kings and emperors were at war over land and name
Well,
and title.
the people were absolutely at war. In fact,
No.
the first non-official crusade was the People's Crusade, a populist movement.
No, the people would have. I know that the people would have willingly chose to live by together. Okay, but it was the kings and emperors that were losing out on all this tax money and all these agricultural goods and mining goods. That's why they went to war. The people would have happily lived together. Why wouldn't they? What did the people have to gain? They didn't turn into these, in our time, billionaires from these wars, did they? They didn't gain any extra power. All they did was lose children, parents, and loved ones. It wasn't worth it for the people, and the people would have not have wanted it.
So I just want to cut in here and just, I think we're talking very generally about the subject, and I was wondering if we can go into more specific things that happened during, I guess, the First Crusade. I mean, I'm curious what your thoughts on the, how the Crusaders made an oath to the emperor of the Byzantine Empire to return the cities to the Byzantine Empire, but actually held on to them and even sieged Jerusalem and held on that and formed the kingdom of Jerusalem. So kind of breaking their oath there. I'm just curious what you guys, kind of your thoughts on that.
Okay, should I start, or do you want to, Pixie?
You start, man.
All right. The Crusaders were the emperor of the Byzantians. He expected something very different than the Crusade. He expected perhaps a band of mercenaries or an army that would simply be sent, reclaim some Byzantine lands, allow them to send in their own army, and that would be it. So when the Crusades arrived, it was a very different beast than Emperor Alexius had ever expected. And he probably saw it as a bit of a nuisance as well, demonstrated by how he actually refused to aid them to begin with. When they then decided, you know what, we're not going to hand over these lands back to the Byzantines because they were near to abandon us when we were in our greatest need, when they were besieged for the first time. Now, the entire Crusades were almost destroyed because of the fact that they had underestimated the sheer logistical challenges involved and the fact that the Byzantines were hesitant, at best, to provide support. At that point, a small minority of the Crusaders, after continuing down to Jerusalem and taking it then from the Egyptians, who had recently taken it from another Muslim nation. I could look up the names, but at which point they decided, okay, we're going to keep it. I believe he was left stranded there with 300 knights and some 10,000 footmen. And that was what was left of the Crusades after the vast majority went back home. So did the Crusaders go back on their vows to return Byzantine lands? Absolutely. Did they have reason to? Well, they certainly thought so. And even then, most of them returned home.
Well, for me, in my opinion, to put it a simple way, was that this just shows that none of this was anything to do with a religious cause or anything holy. This was simple human manner, greed. Okay, they got these lands and the Pope thought, you know what? Let me keep it to myself because I want the papacy to grow and become more powerful. And that's exactly what he did. And that's what all the Crusades were about. He took over the lands and he kept them. And all this helping the Byzantines and the pilgrims, it was all a lie. It was all just to get people motivated and all, fired up to go claim these lands for him. This is it. This is your proof.
Well, we return to the idea that this was not wished for by the people and was done purely out of greed or lust for power. In some cases, surely. I mean, all human conflict has an element of avarice and personal gain. But I think you might be overstating the influence here. In the Middle Ages, an extraordinarily religious time where people believed that God was literally real, that he existed, he saw everything, etc., I think that mere religious motivations at a time, the Pope says you shall go there, and if you do go there, all of your sins will be forgiven. Indeed, we know from rare writings from Frankish knights in particular that many of them went on the crusade not necessarily for reasons of plunder, first and foremost. They could get that back at home in Europe. In fact, they frequently did, raiding each other and launching war against one another. But they knew that they had sinned. And here was the Pope going to the radical solution of saying, if you die in the Crusades, all of your sins are forgiven, and you will be given entry into heaven. And if you literally believe that the alternative is to be tortured forever by Satan's giant burning dildo, that's a pretty good motivation for religious people.
Hey, thank you, man. Thank you for telling us that. I actually very appreciate it because it goes to my second point. That is exactly what the Pope did. And his reason for doing so was for personal gain. And that is it. That was the Crusades. That's how he started the Crusades off. And his motivation, his intentions behind it was for personal monetary gain. That's my point.
But what monetary gain did Pope Urban II gain from this?
All those lands, once it goes under his rule, you do know that they tax the people. They do know that they get to station armies there. That's influential power across the region. They get to mine the gold there. They get to use those people there to join their armies and bolster up their ranks.
But they were not controlled by the Pope. In fact, originally they weren't even supposed to be there at all. The idea that the Pope subscribed to was that the European forces would retreat afterwards, like indeed most of them did. So how could he have simply assumed that some of the knights, Baldwin in particular, would simply stay?
The Crusades was to regain the territory. If they regained it, it would go under his rule, wouldn't it not? Because they weren't going to give it to Byzantines. That's clear. Okay, you can't just say out of nowhere one day they woke up and said, you know what, we're not going to give it back. It was clearly planned and beautifully executed.
Well, if it was clearly planned, why did the vast majority of them not do that?
Because they had loved ones to go back to, not everyone could have gained from it. Only a couple of lords would have been able to tax the lands and gain wealth from it. The rest is either go back to your families or become peasants there. Like I said, the normal people didn't have much to gain over than looting their killed enemies. Just looting them, taking their gold teeth out, etc. It was those lords and popes and emperors and kings that had the most to gain, and that's why they stayed.
This sounds extraordinarily speculative, especially considering that, again, they left, and Pope Urban sent them there originally as a relief force.
Did you not just tell us that they didn't give the lands back to the Byzantines? They didn't give it back, did they? The lands, they didn't give it back. They kept it. Why?
How could they have known that? You are functioning on the assumption that what happened was inevitable, which I do not think it was.
Well, it wasn't inevitable. It was only if they won. And they did win, and that was, the result of it.
I think we are entering into the terrain of just flat-out assumptions here, really. Unless you have something I don't not aware of.
I'm literally just
quote from Godfrey, for example.
I'm using your point. You told us what happened with the Byzantines not getting their lands back, and I just told you the motivation behind it. And
they didn't. No, but you're slightly misinterpreting what I said. They decided to stay, partially because the Byzantines, who had originally promised to aid them, did not do so.
But the Crusades, the Holy Knights, they shouldn't care about their lands, whether they were aided by them or not. They should have just gave it back to the rightful owner, the people that they were there to aid. But they didn't. It was selfish. It was greedy. But I do agree. We are getting off points here.
Of course, there were elements of greed involved. Again, as in any human conflict, there is self-interest.
Was a holy war meant to have any? Was a holy war isn't meant to be polluted by mankind's greed and their own personal gain? That's not what a holy war is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be holy, and you're here admitting that these things did manage to corrupt this holy war.
No, I'm stating that this is a inescapable part of human nature.
And that's what it was. It was a human war. There was nothing holy about it. You can't justify a massacre by saying it was holy. 1.7 million lives were lost, man.
Well, of course you can. Again, they are responding to a religious invasion, and they are responding in kind. That sounds quite justified. It seems as if you are making the moralistic argument, and the moralistic argument is that the war could not be justified because war cannot be justified.
Well, it's easy for you to forget the moral aspect when you haven't lost any family members in that war. Okay, there's nothing close to you. You're running by definitions and numbers, but that's not what it is. We're humans. We're meant to feel things. We're meant to justify things, also using our hearts, It's not all about definitions and things. It's 1.7 million lives lost, and you don't even care. You just think that's a number. That's not. That's something very real. People lose one family member to natural causes, and their entire lives are devastated. Now imagine being part of that butchering, okay, killing, massacring hundreds of people, kids, women. Okay, I'm talking about individuals killing, being a part of a massacre of 100 million. I mean, hundreds of people. Killing one person is bad enough. Imagine killing numerous. And it's like you don't care. You say, you know what, that does not count having a valid justification for this. All you care about is definitions. Okay, that's not right, man.
Well, the simple fact is we are humans. We are an imperfect, flawed species. We wage war upon another, and we have done so practically since as early as we could shape rocks into arrowheads, possibly earlier, just beating each other over the head with blunt objects. And in such a world, we must have the idea of a justified war. It is something that cannot be separated from the human condition. If we did not have so, then, well, we'd all be speaking German by now and marching under a certain red banner, which I think would be immoral. It arrives at a point where you have to ask yourself the question, is it more moral for me to simply submit to an external foe who is invading me, to take my lands, to take my freedom, or is it moral to resist? And in the case of, again, the Crusades, the defensive war, I believe that even from a moral standpoint, it was justified.
Well, let me tell you this, okay? If you took out all the selfish gains that people were to gain from this war, right? All this monetary influential power that they were going to gain from this war, they would have just simply made peace. If it wasn't for land and all this bullshit, I'm sorry for my language, they would have just made peace, okay? Why didn't they make peace? That's what's moral. But let me tell you why didn't they make peace? Because it was all to do with money, monetary gain. Also, what need would there be for butchering so many people? And stop talking about World War II, man. Stop talking about the Nazis, okay? We're here to debate the Crusades.
Well, can I just cut in real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Just to kind of curious to get your viewpoints, both of your viewpoints, about the kind of the economy, the strength of Western Europe. I mean, they were much more poor, relatively speaking, to the Byzantine Empire. Do you think there was no motivation to seek any kind of wealth or gain from this crisis? And we can start with Arch if you want to go, or anyone.
Okay. I'm not sure I follow. Could you reiterate?
So, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, but Western Europe was not nearly as wealthy as the Eastern, Byzantine Empire, as in this could have been potentially an opportunity to gain some of that wealth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You are correct. The Western world at the time was... How do I put this? I believe... Oh, yes, this is a good one. So apparently, at the time, Paris had a population of some 20,000 people. Baghdad had a population of some 1 million plus. So yes, at the time, Europe was vastly more impoverished than the Eastern world. And as I've stated, avarice, greed, is always a part in human conflict. Those who went there would undoubtedly have pillaged. But I don't see what that has to do with the justification of the Crusades. It does not appear to be the goal of the Crusades to pillage. If that was it, then they would have launched attacks far prior to that. And hell, the Byzantines had been fighting them for a year. The Reconquista was raging in Spain. I think it is very important to separate the idea of a attack launch purely for monetary gains from this thing. Hell, I should know, I descend from the Vikings. We made it into a bloody art form, raiding purely for money.
Pixie, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, this is a very vague topic, but if you want to just put it into a simple statement, that, man, listen, I'm all behind that. That's why they attacked. It was all for monetary gain. The people that were going on the crusade, they were poor. They thought they're going to go to these lands to, like, you know, because back in the East, in the Western, right, like Archie said, they were attacking each other nonstop. And I guess they kind of exhausted their own each other's resources to the point that there wasn't much more to gain. So they went on this crusade to this further out lands to see what these people have. And let me read you a letter. Let me read you a thing that they said. Just a moment. We've got a source. Just a moment. Oh. A French crusader sent a letter to his wife in 1098 saying, "My dear wife, I now have twice as much silver, gold, and riches as I had when I set off for this crusade." He's literally bragging to his wife about how much money he's made. Okay, it's clear that when he set off, his intention with his family was, let me go out there, get a lot of loot, come back, and we'll live a lavish lifestyle. He didn't send a letter saying, we freed Christians. He's not mentioning how holy this cause is. He's literally talking about gold and silver to his loved one. Okay, and that's powerful. That says a lot for their intention, right? It was all to do with money.
Okay. Again, I do not deny that greed and avarice takes a part in warfare, but I don't see how this speaks to the justification of the crusade.
This is not meant to take part in a holy war. Okay, this is what I'm stressing to you. This was a holy war, but the intentions behind this was just of as a normal war. Okay, a normal war and a holy war are different. A normal war, okay, money, land, all that, I agree. But a holy war is supposed to be pure. It is meant to be for your religion.
Okay, so we have gone back again now, and now the justification needs to be a religious justification, and that the holy war needs to be pure, otherwise it cannot be justified from a religious, English, Arch, from a religious perspective. Okay. Sure, why not? I mean, I've already made the point for the defensive war, so let's argue the religious aspect of it. Because interestingly enough, what Pope Urban II did was considered extreme, absolutely radical. The idea of promising entry into heaven in a war was just utterly unheard of. Christianity is a religion created by slaves. It is one of non-aggression, of pacifism. And for it to go onto a holy war, something that they didn't even have a concept of, was just insane, basically. Hell, Pope Urban had even been going to the Patriarch in Constantinople to see if he could find some kind of theological, legalistic way to justify this, and he had come up blank. So if you want to talk about this from a purely religious perspective, then there is no clear justification in the Bible for this. But on the other hand, one must then question oneself, if a religion has the ideas of pacifism, should that religion then allow itself to be wiped out because it runs into another religion that does not have the same ideals? I would not think so.
I mean, you just kind of hit it right on the nail, man. You hit the nail right on the head. Thank you. There was nothing in the Bible that would have justified the war, yet the war was fought basically over the ideologies that were based in the Bible. The Bible did not support this Christian war. Thanks, man. You proved my point. The
So,
Crusades were not justified as a holy war, and that's what it was. It was a holy war, but the Holy Grail didn't justify it.
so were these sites and relics not significant to Christians?
I mean, if that's what it was over, I am certain the money and the effort that was spent on this war, only a fraction of it would have been needed to get these relics returned to them and to share the holy sites. You know, they could have just shared the holy sites. Why wouldn't they? It would have been good for trade. It would have been good for peace. They could have both prospered. They could have both made money off it, like they did when the Crusades ended and that long reign of peace. Actually, both sides prospered from.
They actually did. They did share the holy sites, but that was also one of the reasons that actually triggered the Crusades in the first place. Or one of the justifications used was that the Muslim leader that had Jerusalem at the time, Abu Ali Mansur, instituted incredibly brutal and oppressive rules and laws upon Christians, even more so than merely making them into second-class citizens who had to pay the jizya. He even went so far as to destroy the Holy Sepulchre. It was quite clear that the Muslim world, well, it is divided between four different schools of thought when it comes to legalistic matters, some of which are considerably more brutal than the others. And as you mentioned, there were periods of peace, but there were also periods of extreme aggression and violence against those who were considered second-class citizens in the Muslim world. And even then, Christians and Jews had it relatively good because they were people of the book. If we look at, well, the Hindus, for example, well, you'd rather not be a Hindu, let's just leave it at that. But to return to the idea of religious justification, I agree. There is not necessarily a religious justification if we go by the teachings of the Bible purely. But in reality, that only returns us to the question of whether or not Christianity should simply have allowed itself to be exterminated.
A holy war fought over Christianity was not justified by the Bible. I mean, that says it all, man. If the Bible doesn't justify your war, how can all these definitions justify it? The Bible does not justify the war it's been fought over. Come on.
Well, quite simply, because, well, first you started with a moralistic argument, which you abandoned, then you moved over to the greed argument, which has now apparently been abandoned as well, and now finally we've arrived at the religious justification. I mean, hell, even at this point...
Did I abandon it, or am I just moving with the conversation? I mean, this has got to end
sounds
somewhere.
like you couldn't disprove my points, so I would assume so, yes.
Oh, maybe you're changing topics, man. I didn't abandon anything. At the end of the day, we got to reach a conclusion. So we're just moving with the discussion. We've got a limited time for every topic based on this, whatever this debate. I can't just argue about something for 2 hours. I need to keep it moving.
Well, again, then I think definitions is useful.
Well, when it comes to the justification of war, if we're using the Bible as the only source of information, Catholicism, or we're probably taking a Protestant view right now, but Catholicism has a long history of scholastic background and everything else. And you look at Aquinas, his definitions of a just war. So I'm not entirely sure if the Bible is the sole source of what could justify war for Christians. So.
Well, of course not. Well, we're not saying that either. But at the time of Pope Urban, this was the case. But again, that is, if we assume again a perfect world, which I do not think we live in, unfortunately.
The Hebrews, the Jewish people, okay, the people of Jerusalem, okay, those were the origin. That's the people that originated from Jerusalem, one of the holy sites being fought over. They had a saying. They said, to save one life would be to save the entire world, okay? So, of course, you go to them, the people that were mainly affected by this, and tell them, because a life meant a lot to them. You go tell them if the killing of 1.7 million lives were justified, doesn't matter what you say, okay? Those that were mainly affected by it would tell you, no, it wasn't. Okay, these definitions and all this blah de blah that we're going on about doesn't mean it's very little when you think about what was at stake. Okay, this was human lives, and I can't believe that I'm the only one stressing this, but human lives do matter, man, and you can't justify the killing of 1.7 million of them.
Well, this is why I bring up the Second World War as an example, because it is the most commonly known extreme example, because everybody knows the Second World War. Again, if we go by your logic, we should not have resisted the Nazis.
The Second World War was not a holy war. The Second World War was just war, man. They're not the same
I believe
thing.
that certain Nazis would disagree with you on that.
Stop comparing them, man. The holy war was fought that it was basically the holy war was about God telling the Pope and the Pope telling people that they should go and kill these Muslims. Okay, if I want to make it simple, so we don't waste a lot of time. The World War II wasn't about that, and let's just not get into it. Let's not waste time about World War II.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying I'm using it as an example, because it is a commonly known example.
It's not a viable example.
Let me put it like this.
Valid.
If you are of the opinion that a human life is of paramount importance, under what circumstances would a war be justified in self-defense?
Okay, we're not talking about a war. We're talking about crusade, or a holy war. It doesn't matter what a war is justified, because that's not what happened. A war did not occur. A holy war did.
Okay, but a holy war is a war, and since it was persecuted by humans, I don't see why there is need to distinguish between the two, other than on a moralistic base point.
A holy war, for example, the Crusades would have to at least need the Bible approving of it, which it didn't. Okay, a holy war is about gods, okay, and no God and no holy book approved of it. Hence, why it can't be justified.
The Pope did. The God's vicar on earth said so.
Oh, come on, man! You know that is BS. Okay,
if we're going to go by religious definitions, like you were saying, if the Pope, God's vicar on earth, says so,
how can God's vicar say that God's telling him to kill people when there is no mentions of it in the Bible? The Bible does not support Pope's statement, and the Bible was it not written by God or Jesus or whoever it was?
God's vicar on earth. Once again, if we're going by these ideas of religious definitions and
then
justifications,
why didn't the Bible support it? Then why didn't the Bible support what the God's vicar on earth said? What isn't God's vicar on earth supposed to follow the Bible, not the other way around?
Probably the same reason why the Bible has been rewritten a few dozen times, because it was been written by humans and not by God.
So then it can't be. So okay, then. So what you're saying is religion doesn't exist. Hence, we can't have a religious war. This was a normal war, and you can't justify it as a religious war.
No, I do believe religion exists. I am somewhat skeptical as to whether or not God exists. That is true, but religion most decidedly does exist.
I mean, I guess it depends on who you're asking, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to offend any of the viewers. I want us all to be comfortable here.
Real quick to just step in here. We are doing questions from the chat. So if you need, any questions that you would like to want us to go over, anything, just to get the chat involved, and of course,
get the chat involved. Get the chat.
Of course, super chat. Of course, we'll definitely check out and stuff. So appreciate all the support and whatnot. But we've been talking about a lot about the Eastern conflicts. I think a couple times we talked about the Iberian Peninsula, but it seemed that the crusade initially to the east to help the Byzantine Empire really inspired many Iberian Christians to try to push Muslims out of Spain. What are your thoughts on that, Pixie? And, was that not justified to take back territory?
So was it justified the Christian Iberians? Could you rephrase that again, please? Canada.
So it seemed like the crusade over to the east inspired. The Pope really rallied the Iberian Christians to take back some of the land that they lost to Muslim expansion. Is there no justification to that?
I mean, if these Christian Iberians were to say, okay, we're inspired by the Crusade, let's take back our lands, of course that's justified. But if these Iberians were going to say, you know what, let's begin a holy war, okay, let's take back our land because this is what God said, of course that's not justified. I'm telling you, if this was a normal war, it would have been justified, but it wasn't. It was a holy war. So it depends how the Iberians chose to define their war.
Well, I guess is there something wrong with like-minded, similar culture, using a religion to unite people to push back a people that brings drastic changes to their lands?
Did they unite the people or did they manipulate them? Did they tell them straight up how it was, or did they say this is what God's telling you to do?
Archie, do you have any?
Should I? Okay.
Yeah.
The Reconquista was a nationalistic venture, far more so than it was religious. Religious, of course, had a part in it, but the Reconquista, the retaking of the Iberian Peninsula, that was far more nationalistic in nature than a crusade.
All right.
Is there any other questions?
From the chat?
Yeah.
Just looking through, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Ryan, do you see anything that anyone brought up here? Because I was kind of not looking at it the past couple minutes.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have it up, so give me a moment.
Okay. We're ready.
I mean, is there a poll you can take to see what the viewers think? We're justified, yes or no?
We can post a straw poll. I think that would be pretty interesting to see what.
Post from them.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I can write up a straw poll, but I mean, feel free to keep discussing anything you want to bring up.
I mean, Arch, you got any questions you want to ask me? Is there anything you want to put me under pressure about?
Well, let's explore the idea of the Holy War, because that is a bit of an interesting dichotomy I've arrived at. So let's assume that the Crusades were not justified because they were not pure enough. Would you also condemn Islam in general as well?
I mean, there are many, many, many countless things about Islam that I disagree with. One of them was the greed. I mean, there's many conflicts happening in the Middle East and to this time. Okay, it's not nothing old. It's always been like this in the Middle East, and of course I condemn it and I disagree with it. But yeah, man, I don't think just because I don't like what happened with the Crusades, that means I like what's happening with what the wars that was justified with the name of Islam. No, I don't agree with anything that they did in terms of war.
So all holy wars, universally, unless they are for an entirely religious and pure ideal, are unjustified.
Exactly. Because there were normal
quite
wars.
The extremist opinion.
I mean, there were normal wars. That's how they should have been, defined as. Not don't sugarcoat it with the word holy and God. Just say it how it is. And if people want to join you, then okay, don't manipulate them by using God.
Well, interestingly, I don't actually think... Did Pope Urban use the term holy war?
He said that God spoke to it. How?
Pope Urban did not, no.
Which Pope was it that did that? I can't really remember
Pope
the name.
Urban II was the one who initiated the Crusades.
That's him. He said that God spoke to it. That's crazy, man.
Again, the speech at Claremont was destroyed in a fire a long time ago, so it's difficult to know precisely what he said, but I have yet to find a version of that speech in which he claims that God told him this.
I read it somewhere, if I can find it. But yeah, I mean, the Pope Urban II said this is again not a precise quote, but this is a source that I'm using. I'll send a link in if you want to double check it. He said somewhere around that the Pope said that it is all right to kill, or even better, rewarded to kill anyone that does not believe in God. For them, it was the Muslims. However, this was actually not true. God had never told the Pope this, because there is nothing in the Bible that would approve of such message. Again, it just depends on how legit this source is. I'm just using this source.
Okay, but even then, it doesn't state that Pope Urban stated that his God had told him this. It's just that he said you should kill them because.
No, he said that God said this to him. He said God had told the Pope that they would be rewarded to kill a Muslim and not rewarded if they killed a Christian.
Okay, but is this perhaps paraphrasing?
Yeah, let me. I'll send the link in just so you can check it afterwards, so you see that I'm not lying. But
I don't think you're lying. I think maybe you're misinterpreting or misunderstanding.
I mean, you can word it how you like to win the argument, but that's what was said initially, right? I mean,
well, that's what I'm disputing. But you can send the link in the Hangout chat if you want to.
Yeah, of course, man. General chat in the Discord. Let the viewers see. Let them read.
Do you want me to post the link in the chat?
I put it in the general chat, and I put it into our chat too, the Hangout chat.
Okay.
At everyone. Is there any questions that the viewers want to ask?
Well, someone brought up a good question, just kind of diving deeper into this subject of the difference between a standard war and a holy war. So this was by Patrick in the chat. He said, let's hear the difference between a holy war and a standard war in terms of whether or not it's justified. So I'm curious your two viewpoints on that.
For me, this is a holy war. A war that was approved. Well, we're going to use the Christians we're going to use them as an example. Okay, a Christian holy war, this is how it would be justified. If the Bible approved of it, and if the Pope said exactly what God had actually told him to. Okay, now, that did not happen. What the Pope said that he was told by God was not approved by the Bible. They did not correlate, and they literally had no connection. And during that war, and by end of it, those people that went on this crusade would not have benefited from it at all. A good Christian, a truly holy Christian, would not loot a dead body like a savage barbarian. Okay, and that's what happened. And they would try to find a peaceful way out, like negotiate, trying their best as war, as a final, result. That is what a Christian. That's what a holy war would have been in terms of Christians. What a normal war would be: you lose land, you raise an army, and you attack. That's it.
Okay, so from what I can understand from what you're saying is the fact that since in the Bible there's nowhere that justifies this act, and the fact that they are saying that this is, something that God would approve of, that makes it not a holy war. Like if somewhere in the Bible it said, if Eastern lands get attacked, you must rally and defend them, would it be justified?
Yeah.
Okay.
Arch?
Yeah, Arch, I'm curious what you have to say.
I don't believe there is any real distinction between the two, because there is no such thing as a truly perfect human being. It's even the most religious person, if put in a situation of extreme deprivation, surrounded, starving, etc., would probably go pretty damn far to sustain his own life. So the idea that a holy war must be pure, I think, is simply an unobtainable ideal that is devoid or divided from reality.
Hence why a holy war has never happened, because none of them were ever holy. It doesn't matter if it's possible or not. That's what a holy war is, and either you follow the rules or you don't. It's just simple as that, man.
So could this just be a justified war, stopping there, not adding the holy part?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. This could have been justified as a war, just not a holy war. The question was, were the Crusades justified? And the Crusades were a holy war. That you can't justify it as a holy war. That's what it was defined as. And I'm here trying to tell you that that's not what it was. It was just war, just greed. That's just a normal war. And for me, the two are very, very, very different.
All right. I mean, it seems like it's just if they called it the Great War to the East, it would have been justified. But the fact that they called it a crusade.
Yeah, of course, because when they called it a crusade, that manipulated many Christians into thinking that it was God's cause, you know? You told all these people that's what God's telling you to do this, instead of telling them, no, we're telling you to do this. You know, that's what my problem is. Why would you manipulate so many people because you simply couldn't afford an army?
All right. I mean, yeah, that's an interesting take for sure. Is there anything you guys want to cover in particular? Any specific events or anything that kind of dives into that?
Not particularly, not me.
All right. Well, Regulus, you want to... I mean, is there anything you want to bring up event-wise, or maybe we should just bring it to a close?
Well, yeah, it seems like the real distinction here is they both agree that it's a justified war, but it's whether or not it's justified a holy war or not. And I think there's some overlap there as well. It's just like motivating. What motivates these people? That's where the real distinction comes. Right. I think there's a lot of modern perspectives being placed on a people from a completely different time, but
yeah, exactly. I'm willing to just settle it with it wasn't a justified holy war, but if maybe they would have worded things differently and didn't manipulate so many people, yeah, that could have been justified.
But I mean, don't you feel like any war, you know, a higher up group, it doesn't matter what the war is, whether it's just or not, you're going to manipulate people into fighting it?
I mean, that's a whole different topic, but just I guess manipulating people to fight your war for you as a whole is wrong. But in this particular case, it is especially even worse because you use religion, you use something that they were really vulnerable to as a weapon against them.
Right. Almost like a fear.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to come on here. And thanks, Archie. He provided us with a lot of good facts, a lot of things that I really found interesting, educated us a lot. And you'll find my Discord linked in the chat. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Pixie. So, yeah, this was really, really interesting, really fascinating to hear two different sides here. Again, I just want to thank the two debaters who came on, Arch and Pixie. I appreciate it. This was our first debate, and this is a topic that I'm sure we could always go back to if people want to dive into it again, or again have even more perspectives into it. Yeah, we've got our Discord linked in the description. We're always looking for other topics to discuss about if anyone's, wanting to debate a certain topic. Again, we're going to host it here on Civitas. Regulus, you have anything you want to add to that?
I just want to thank Arch and Pixie for coming on and shedding some light on a topic that has a lot of contention. A lot of people don't. There's clearly a lot of different angles from this, so I just appreciate you guys coming on and sharing that with us.
Yeah, sure, man. By the way, Archie was a very formidable opponent. I'm really glad I had him. Someone that was very clearly educated on this topic. I'm glad I got to have a chance to debate with you.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of educational value to this, and the point is just having a fun community that can get together and talk about stuff and just have a good time. So, I guess we're gonna wrap it up here, guys. Just want to say thanks to the chat. This was a lot of fun. We're gonna go ahead and work on setting up another debate for another topic. Of course, just if you're new, subscribe and you can see the next debate. Yeah.
Don't forget to put the statistic polls on there. Let them vote. Or is it justified or not?
Oh yeah, you guys want to hear what that's at?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Okay, let's refresh it. It would have been cool if we did a vote before and then did another vote at the end to see if anyone's minds were changed or anything. But right now, so the question is: were the Crusades justified? 65% said yes, 22% said no, and 14% said undecided. So
the 22% that said no, you guys are very smart. You should be proud of yourselves.
All right, cool. I guess we'll close it here. So thanks everyone for watching. This was good fun, and I'm super excited for the next one. So see you guys next time.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye. Take care.